Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today it is another Monday, therefore we are going to be working in my sketchbook today. So technically the session was not really planned, hence why I didn't show the sketching portion. I was just randomly sketching out Qifrey for some reason in my sketchbook, and I decided that I wanted to attempt painting it with gouache. So for the sketch, ended up using the MIYA nano color. I don't know if I said that right, in the color blue. And I usually don't use my blue or my photo blue whenever I'm doing gouache because I don't typically like having that blue color or any cooler tone color seeping through, as I tend to lean a little bit more towards warmer colors, especially when painting characters, just because usually for skin tone I do like leaning it a little bit warmer. And the flowers that I chose, I also wanted to be more into that warmer color palette. So yeah, I was not really exactly prepared for this session, but we're just gonna go with it. So starting off, other than the sketch, I pulled out my watercolors as it's easier for me to plan out, and I always feel like maybe I shouldn't do this step and just go in straight with gouache, but it does give me a little bit of peace of mind and I enjoy using watercolors more, so it's a little bit more fun for me to do this step first. I think I've talked about it in the past that there's kind of two main reasons that I like to use watercolor, and one is to low-key prime the paper a little bit, as this is notebook paper. It doesn't take water mediums super well. It's not too bad, but it's not the best for it. It is much thinner paper, there's no texture or anything, so oftentimes water mediums or wet mediums don't have anything to really grip to, and sometimes if you use too much water you might have a little bit of pilling or a little bit of that speckliness because the paper does not have any sizing and it's not meant for wet mediums. But it never really stopped me from using watercolors as well as using gouache in the sketchbook. I've had sometimes good results, let's say 1 in 5 gouache pieces I would say I'm typically happy with. This one falls in kind of the mid range. I don't love it and I didn't hate it, or at least process wise I didn't hate it by the time I finished the piece, so at least that's a plus for me. Another reason that I like to use watercolor is typically to establish the colors that I potentially want, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I was kind of questioning myself whether or not I want to continue doing this step with watercolors, because I feel like it does give me a little bit of false sense of hope in a way. I do have kind of a love-hate relationship with gouache, and I like having my colors be a little bit they're vibrant, but I want to keep the airiness when it comes to watercolor to a certain extent. But whenever I work with gouache, it does become a lot more either muted as well as becoming more and more darker. I don't know if it's because I tend to push the values more, or because I don't have a lot of experience trying to keep all my values a little bit lighter before we go into something a little bit darker, if that makes sense. There are some areas that I'm able to preserve to make them a little bit more airier and lighter, which typically is just fewer layers, I guess. We'll get into that in a little bit because I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself in terms of working with the gouache. So I have not touched my gouache in what feels like a long time, so we're reviving them a little bit. They are significantly drier than I remember. Typically the gap between every time I've used my gouache, I don't think it's too long. It definitely has been more than a few months since I've used gouache, only solely for the fact that the 4 kind of green colors in the center of my palette are the ones that are more moist. So no matter how long I've used or haven't used my palette, those 4 green paints, I always find that they're almost never dried out. But this time they were almost bone dry, so it's been definitely way too long since I've touched this palette. So I ended up using a blunt and syringe, sucked up some of the water from my jars, and then started to kind of overflow them with water, which you'll see in a little bit when I do a close-up of the sketchbook, because you'll see some of them have pooling of water, which does help to a certain extent, but because I don't really mix it into the paint, eventually I feel they're just gonna continually make my paints drier and drier, kind of the same way if you were to, I guess, pretend to hydrate your hand after it's already been really bone dry. After it dries again, it just feels drier than it was before. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So eventually I will go find my clay tools again and remix my paints so that they're a little bit less of that bone dryness despite how much water I decide to pool in it. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and work with the gouache. So initially, and every time I've worked with gouache, I always have the mindset, or like I know what I would like to do, but I never end up doing it. So first of all, we're starting off with some lighter layers. I'm doing a lot more of like the kind of like beige-ish color, as well as using a light yellow for a lot of the bases. I'm watering it down quite a bit and then doing a light pass over everything. So I can still see my sketch at this point, but I wanted to give a little bit more of like a base of some sort. And I think it helped quite a bit. There is more or less one area that I ended up struggling with, which are, I guess, like typically the darker colors that I would like to use for the gouache, but I make them a little bit too dark because, like I said, the watercolor does give me a good sense of where I wanted to place certain colors. But you can see initially for Qifrey's kind of like upper torso area and arms, it's not like significantly darker than any of the values currently on the page, but as I start to paint more and more with some of the thicker layers, I end up going a lot darker. I should have just kept it at this value. I actually really like the colors being more pastel. I could have done darker line art or switched to pens or something to do the line art, but in the end, I'm going to make them a lot darker and I'm going to struggle trying to cover up a lot of my mistakes. I think also at the very beginning, I didn't realize before I started recording that I ended up making the pose a little bit too short feeling. So when I was sketching out Qifrey initially, I typically, if I'm smart, I will have to kind of like block out the entire body before starting details. But because I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do for the pose, I started with the face and started moving down the body and just like kind of freestyling it to the point where I did not have a plan. And because of that, I didn't block out the body with the right proportioning. So I think I was trying to squeeze his body to fit within the page. And then initially I had his knees closer to his face. So it was going to be a little bit longer as well, or should have been a little bit longer, but as well is going to be a little bit more scrunched at the same time. But I ended up putting the knees further away from the face, but I ended up lifting the body, or like the mid torso area, too high up, which in turn made the rest of the body look wonky. So luckily for the gouache, I was able to extend where his, I guess like where his butt and the upper part of his thigh is, where the arms are kind of like touching, to hopefully elongate the body a little bit more. It might still look a little bit wonky in the end, but at least it's not too short in my opinion, or at least hopefully, if I'm remembering correctly. So every time I've worked with gouache, like I said, it feels like 1 in 5 is kind of my ratio in terms of whether or not I like the piece. And I don't really have a definitive answer on what makes me feel more confident with gouache or less confident, or what makes me like the piece more or dislike the piece more while working on it. I can definitely see or feel the point where I get frustrated with the piece, but I can't really tell exactly why or how to push through it. I know it's partly because I don't have a painting background. Like, it's harder for me to grasp how to paint, I think, compared to maybe some other people. And I've talked about it in the past that when I was in uni, because I did do fine arts in uni, I was definitely the weakest painter. And no matter how much I've tried, it just takes me a lot longer for me to understand how to work with paint. And acrylic paint was the easiest for me to work with. And I don't know if it's because I did a lot of dry brushing and you can let your layers dry in between. And because of that, I feel like people have suggested for me to try out acrylic gouache eventually. And as much as I would like to think it might be a little bit easier for me to use, in the end, I think I just struggle with painting in general. Other than watercolors, watercolors, at least for me, is both slower but easier for me to manage because it's more similar to dry medium in a sense for me. And I know that might seem a little bit more backwards because watercolor has water in its name and probably uses the most amount of water compared to any other painting medium. But to me, it works the best in my brain, and I do miss doing watercolors like properly. So I might do that for a future session or for a live stream or something, hopefully next week. We'll see. Because I don't really know what I have planned, or maybe I'll do a bonus video because now that April has been hopefully a little bit more free for me, I'm going to be opening up commissions again because I want to work on more commissions, but I can't guarantee whether or not that's going to make me more busy or I'm going to have a little bit more balance. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, I feel like the hair typically is the easiest part for me to work on because I don't mind the brush strokes or like things looking a little bit patchy because I can always just add more details and flesh it out, and usually it looks okay. The part that I struggled, and you're watching me do it right now, is the patchiness. Actually, what the heck happened? I don't know if there was just me pausing the recording because I got frustrated or not, and I ended up fixing it a little bit later. But you can see that the patchiness and me being confused about how I wanted to approach the upper torso of Qifrey's body was just confusing me. And it is the area that has the darkest value because he does have more of like a black top, and then the rest of the fabric is more towards like white, and then everything else is kind of like mid-tone to light-ish area of value. But the top part, or like his black shirt, I just struggled. I didn't know how I wanted to do the highlights. I didn't know how dark I wanted to go. And every time I tried to correct or try to cover up my brush strokes, I ended up getting darker and darker, which is not ideal for what I was looking for because I wanted to keep things a little bit more on the lighter side. But I don't know if it's because I had more of a preference towards like my watercolor painting, like I mentioned. So I don't know if this is me being a little bit too picky. And I think part of it also is the fact that whenever I do painting that isn't like watercolor, because I do feel like I have most control when using watercolor, and I have like a certain preference in mind. I know a lot of people can use watercolor in very different ways and like have more texture or leaving a lot of brush strokes or using a little bit of dry brushing or like all that. I typically like things to be smoother and softer if I can, but when working with gouache, I definitely fight against having too much of that like texture, which is not necessarily bad. To have a lot of texture is just something my brain was like, you gotta hide these brush strokes, like you gotta make it smooth. So I'm looking at it right now and I actually don't mind what it looks like. Obviously the value more towards like the arm that's kind of like hidden, the one that's kind of further away from us, should be in theory lighter if I want to have the more of like an atmospheric perspective rather than like the arm being hidden in shadow and maybe it's like supposed to be darker, if that makes sense. So later on, I do end up correcting it, and I think it turns out okay. But like I said, I should be a little bit more lenient and allow myself to have more of that painterly look rather than making everything, you know, flow and look very smooth, because it does irk me sometimes when things look overly smoothed or round because it just doesn't look organic or natural, if that makes sense. But like overall, the painting experience for this one, I didn't really dislike. And I feel like that's why this one kind of falls into like the mid category for me in terms of like, I don't like it, but I don't dislike it. And then both the painting experience and the finished result is kind of like in that same area. I don't dislike it, but I don't love it. And here's like pass number 3, I think, of me doing the dark shirt for Qifrey. I don't know what's going on. Oh, also, kind of off tangent in terms of the gouache painting, but kind of on topic in terms of the character. So for Witch Hat Atelier, I do want to do like a sketching session, hopefully, of just sketching the characters once again, but I want to play around with more Clip Studio paintbrushes. So I'm gonna look around to see whether or not I've downloaded anything recently and just doing a casual sketch session ASMR like we do usually. And I want to play around maybe with inking. We'll see how that goes. Because every time I look at any artwork of Shirahama, which is like the author and artist of Witch Hat Atelier, I'm always kind of like enamored and wowed. So I want to practice a little bit more. So we'll see when we can do that. So if I have time, maybe I'll make it a bonus video this week. But if not, I'll save it for like another time. And I don't want to like yap too much about my love for Witch Hat Atelier right now. Maybe I'll talk about it in a different video when more stuff has come out and it's going to be a little bit less spoilery for people, if that makes sense. Because the last thing I want to do is like ruin the experience for somebody else for consuming or wanting to consume Witch Hat Atelier with no spoilers. So at some point I will definitely do more fan art that's for videos rather than just like doodles and stuff in my sketchbook or doodles for my Instagram stories, all that jazz. So do look out for that. But in the meantime, what else was I supposed to talk about in this video other than my kind of contempt for gouache? Oh, live streams. So streaming, I want to get back into again a little bit more consistently, but I'm gonna go a little bit back and forth on exactly what I'm gonna be working on. I know someone suggested that I should stream my commissions. But the thing is that streaming art sometimes and having to either interact with chat or being on camera in a sense, like the fact that people can low-key perceive me, and I don't mean like me physically, I mean just like me in general, it does make me feel like I can't concentrate on the piece as much. In the past, I feel like it might have been okay, but more recently, I want to lock in to my commissions so that I can finish them on time with my full attention. But sometimes I feel like when I'm working on it on stream, I'm gonna have to make a bunch of corrections off camera. So I like to keep my commissions probably not for live streams until I get comfortable again, because I don't know if it's just the difference in my attention span recently and my motivation, but I just want to make sure I treat my commissions with like my full attention. So I probably won't work on commissions on stream for like quite a while, so hopefully that makes sense. But I do think it would be fun if I could do some sort of series or have a plan for like illustrations that I want to do for streams so that I don't have to come up with something on the spot. That, or we can just do like doodling sessions and stuff, right? Because I don't have to pre-plan everything for streams. But I do miss having a little bit less pressure of having to do a lot of prep. So if I have something a little bit ongoing, then I can always pick that back up and then work on it very casually during stream. Kind of like when I was working on art fight stuff, which I'm so excited for July, because for at least for art fight, if I can, I'm gonna do as many streams as I can working on like art fight revenges and attacks, because I think that's so fun and I love chatting with you guys alongside with you guys also working on your art fight attacks or defenses or whatever. So I'll definitely do that in the future. And I haven't done it yet. And I know I said this in the past that I would not do any type of gaming stream, but I want to sneak in, maybe if it does work, a stream or a few streams that are more like late night, where it's going to be a little bit more slower pace and maybe cozier, so that I can play Pokopia with you guys, because I think it would just be fun streaming like a cozy game, and then I get to sneak in a little bit of gaming here and there and I don't feel as guilty playing. So I'll definitely test a little bit, because I did recently get a capture card recently, so I just need to fiddle with my setup because of my weird monitors and stuff. I want to see how that capture card will work and will it work for streaming. So once I get that set up, we'll do like casual kind of late night Pokopia streams sometime. And then obviously I'll squeeze in some stuff that's more like traditional art, and maybe we'll do like one building stream. I know some people might be confused on what I mean by building stream. So I think this might have been 2 years ago. 2 years ago, my friend actually gave me this kind of like really cute, I think it's like a Sakura music box or something. And it's like one of those pieces where you can build the little, like you pop up the pieces and you build the whole contraption and stuff. So I want to maybe do that for a stream, because I think it just would be fun. But I think I've yapped through the entirety of the rest of this painting. So I ended up painting Qifrey right here alongside with some peonies in the background. And yeah, I'm not super happy with it, but I'm not super disappointed. But yeah, that's kind of the process for this one. I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video though, hopefully with, I don't know, ASMR maybe? We'll see. But thanks for hanging out today, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!